And good morning, Pastor Adam Jacobson here with another devotion for your day as we continue through our devotional series here in the book of Ecclesiastes. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we get into some of really kind of repeated wisdom from Solomon. These are points he's made before, but I think after everything that we've heard up to this point, it's kind of trying to drive the nail home. And then we end with talk about our marriages, our spouse, our wife in particular for us guys, and the idea of enjoyment, finding joy in our relationship, how we can do that, and all those type of things coming up next. So what we're going to do is we're going to get back into a few of the verses that we ended with on Friday, just to kind of get this whole section put together and go in through chapter 9. Or I should say a good chunk of chapter 9. But we'll get through a good section here. So what we want to do is we want to get through Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 16 to 97. We might extend that just a little bit. Actually, I do want to extend it. I completely forgot about that. So give me a second here. We want to go till verse 10 today. Now that I'm looking at it, I think I ended just a touch too early. So good morning, Shirley. Great to see you already. So let's dive into Ecclesiastes. Sorry about that. Let's dive into Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 16. And then we're going to read through. When I, so Solomon, apply my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep. Then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. All right. Good morning, Joanne. But all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner, and he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Also, the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. Go eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white, let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. Now remember, Sheol is the concept of the grave in the Hebrew mind. It encompasses both kind of heaven and hell. You can imagine kind of a realm, as it were. Jesus gives us some more details of how this works. Seems to be at least two sides of it. You have where Abraham is and Lazarus there, and that story that Jesus tells us, some sort of fixed chasm, Jesus says, and on the other side, hellfire and anguish. So that's kind of the concept that we're talking about. Okay, so here we go. Let's back up into Ecclesiastes 8, verse 16. Good morning, Katie. All right, so when I apply my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes sleep. Maybe Solomon had a little bit of insomnia in his life. He does seem to bring up sleep a lot. we think of this as being just a modern problem, but if you read ancient authors, if you read diaries of people in 16, 17, 1800, you will find that this is a common problem of mankind. Solomon is reminding us that sleep is a gift from the Lord. He mentions this in Proverbs as well, that God has given all things to us. He portions it out. We're going to talk about that at the very end of our study today. So then I saw all the works of God that man cannot find out, the work that is done under the sun. So this is what we call, especially in the Lutheran Church, but you will find this in other church bodies as well. They may call it by a different term, but they mean the same thing. We call it the hidden will of God, or Deus abscondicus. This is the idea that there are certain things that are obscured to us. There are certain things that we do not know and we cannot know. Anyone who says contrary to that is a very large blockhead and probably needs to rethink their understanding of who God is versus who we are. There are things that God does that we simply do not understand. We wish we did. We wish we could, at the very least, have a crystal ball to kind of, even at a distance, discern the things that are going to happen. But the truth is we don't, and we cannot. This, by the way, is kind of getting behind the not using God's name in vain commandment, that we don't, if according to our Lutheran explanation of it, we don't curse, we don't swear, we don't use satanic arts, lie or deceive by his name. There are things that we cannot know. And so when we turn to, the horoscopes, tarot cards, divinations of different kinds, what we are doing is misusing God's name. We're trying to put God in something that he has not given us to know, and we're trying to make it kosher by figuring out the future. It's not a good thing. I do see I'm losing a little bit of internet connectivity here this morning. So I'm going to keep going because it usually uploads a good stream later. So I'm going to keep going in case I do fall. That's just a warning for y'all. So this is something for us to consider. Why do we want to know these things? Wisdom does not nor cannot explain God's hidden will, and it doesn't try to. There are certain things that we just don't know. And a good example of this is my sermon from yesterday, Sunday, is on John chapter 9, the man born blind. The disciples asked that karma question, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? There are some things we don't know, but Jesus in that moment reveals something to us that maybe we hadn't considered. That some, probably all actually, in the grand scheme of how many events in every second of every moment of everyday life for all of us happen, God is using them for his glory. We know that. Then we need to have faith and trust that what he is doing is ultimately for our best. This is a hard lesson, but it can only be comprehended by wisdom, because wisdom versus folly, and we see both of those things in Solomon's writings, Proverbs, we see it here in Ecclesiastes, we'll see it in Song of Songs if we ever do that someday. Wisdom is equated with faith, hope, looking forward to the knowledge of what God has given us and to know that he has given us all things, versus foolishness, which the ultimate form of foolishness is to deny the existence of God. So we cannot discern God's love or grace by the external things in our life. That's what he's pointing out here. Notice he says here in chapter 9, verse 2, it is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner, and he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. In other words, you search out life, and it is tempting. Again, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about yesterday with karma, is this idea that, well, the reason things happen is because certain people are better or good or do nicer things in life than others. You can try to ride that train as far as it will go. But then when bad things ultimately happen, and especially the ultimate evil, that we all die no matter what, that wisdom's not going to hold out. So when we see evil happen or good happen to a person, we can't take that necessarily as a sign of God's absolute love and mercy and grace. Like that's the sign that, if good things happen to me, God loves me. But if bad things happen, God doesn't love me. This is a bad way to run theology. The only thing we have then is a heart of faith and hope in his promises. Remember what the book of Hebrews calls faith. Faith is hope in what we are looking for, certainty of what we do not see. That's a far cry from, again, how we would try to live out our life, our vain days, as Solomon says, attempting to figure out if I'm good enough, if I'm getting rewarded or awarded well enough for the things that I do. And what we end up doing ultimately is we start comparing ourselves with everybody else, and we start robbing ourselves of joy. Remember, comparison is the thief of joy almost every single time. The other thing that tends to happen is that we tend to assume the worst in other people. An example of this, although it is limited, so excuse the limitations of this example, we tend to maybe get a little bit upset when we see people rejoicing in the good things they have. Maybe it's because they're posting it on Facebook all the time, or they're always talking about their kids or grandkids and how everything's great. And these things happen because they are enjoying the moment. It's when people look from the outside and decide to criticize and hate that they're robbing themselves of joy by attempting to rob the other person of joy. So really what we need to do is fix ourselves first. Remember, the only person we can fix is ultimately ourselves. So let's start at home before we start criticizing everybody else. In other words, be thankful. That's the whole point. Here, the good versus the evil, they both receive the same gift. God causes the rain to fall on the just or the unjust is another way to explain it. You could have, just to use an agricultural example for where we live right now, we look around, your field's getting the rain, this guy's field's getting the rain, but that guy's a, completely miserable miser. Is what it is, right? And then at the same time, maybe you don't get the rain and he does. Well, that doesn't seem fair. But ultimately, everything is a gift from God, and we have to accept it as that. So now let's keep going on down here. It is interesting that although all this happens, take note that the wicked do have a little bit of an issue. Verse 3, this is an evil and all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. In other words, it's not fair. Also, the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. When we see madness, we're talking about sin, which is the ultimate madness. Why? Because sin is ultimately against the design of God in life. Sin is that which is against the life that God has given. This, by the way, helps us understand why certain things are taken more seriously, or it seems to be taken more seriously in the Bible. All sin is damnable. All sin can send us to hell in that sense. But there are certain sins that are taken a little bit more seriously than others. They're all serious, but some, for example, in the Old Testament lead to execution. Why some and not all of them? Because there are certain things that continue to break us further from God's design in life. So note this, that the madness of our world today, which there is absolutely madness in our world today, is always going to be a parody of what is true. Okay? So people pretending to be what they cannot be, for example. So sin is the definition of madness, and the ultimate madness then is to deny God. That there's nothing out there, even if we kind of took the Christian faith off the table for just a moment, to look at the world and simply say, it just is. This is the atheist dilemma, is an ultimate madness. And it takes just as much faith as the most ardent of Christians to look around and hold these positions. You see this especially with some of the big evolutionist atheist out there in this world, Dawkins in particular, where he has to keep backing up how we came into existence. And at least from what I remember, I don't keep track of him too often, but from what I remember lately, he says that life came to Earth on the back of alien crystals. Well, that got you out of how life got here on Earth, but then you got to ask the question, where did the life of aliens come from? It's just absolute madness, and it's never ending. And there's more hidden will in that than we could ever assume with God. At least God has truly revealed things to us about the truth and about nature. This is a never ending rabbit hole that the atheist goes down. Knowing that we die then, madness is to live without faith. And that's his point here in this second part of chapter 9, really verses kind of 4 down to 6. It's absolute folly and madness. You know that you die. Why live without any hope whatsoever? Because if that's the case, then why not end it all now? And yet there's something within us that strives against ending it all. It's almost as if we know life is a good thing. We just are having difficulty with things in the moment. So this is where he goes, their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun, because their hope has perished. This is ultimately what unbelief is. It's the abandonment of actual hope. Maybe that puts things on a different perspective in your conversations with unbelievers. What you're dealing with is ultimately a lack of hope. And in our world today, there's probably many reasons that people have a lack of hope. Just turn on the news for 5 seconds. You'll see that there's so much out there that things are getting very dark and evil. By the way, we were told this was going to happen, so it shouldn't take us by surprise, even though it seems to take me by surprise every time I turn on the news anymore. Anyway, it shouldn't, but there you are, right? Okay, so now let's get down to the advice of what to do. That's the advice that makes us think, oh, there's nothing, everything's meaningless. That's not the point. Remember, this is a book of joy. So what's the advice about joy? Go eat your bread with joy. Go enjoy the vain thing in life. It doesn't amount to a hill of beans. The bread will perish. It will be expelled from our bodies, and we will need more of it. This is how it goes. And drink your wine with a merry heart. And the word for wine here in Hebrew, yes, means alcohol. To do so with a merry heart means that you can't be given over to the addictions of it. So that's something that we need to remember here as well. Let your garment be always white. For God has already approved what you do. And we're talking about somebody who has wisdom and faith here. We're not talking about somebody who's acting outside of God's law and sin and all those type of things. So let your garments be always white. Take care of yourself. Take care of the things God has given you. They're his portion. They're his gift for you. Take pride in what he has given you. Why? Because you know it comes from God. Let not oil be lacking on your head. There's no use going around being miserable about everything. The idea of oil not being on your head, fat was a big resource in the ancient world, especially since the Israelites couldn't eat the fat of many of their sacrifices and meats and stuff like that. It was prohibited. So oil is that source. It's in essence, it's a lotion. It's a conditioner for your hair. They use it for all sorts of different things. So this is something for us to consider. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life. I don't think Hallmark's going to make many anniversary cards out of that one. By the way, pro tip, don't use that verse for your anniversary, but it is interesting. All the days of your vain life, love your wife, right? Interesting. So why is this? Life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life. First of all, living joyfully with our wife, enjoying the things that we have, is a gift from God. This is something God gives us. The person that God has placed in your life, your spouse, is indeed the one God has put in your life. How do I know this? Because you said it, especially in the Lutheran Church, the vows that we take, you said it. You said that in sickness and health and rich or poverty, all these things, right? You said it. And therefore, God has granted you the gift. Here the person is, for better or worse. So enjoy what you have now, even when the times are worse. Why? Because when we remember that God portions out the gifts, once we understand the nature of things, that even marriage passes. Remember, Jesus says in heaven, we are neither married nor given into marriage. Once we understand that all these gifts pass and that there's bigger and better gifts yet to come, we can sit back and laugh and see things for what they really are. And this is where your joy comes from. You can sit back and look at the glass of wine and you can enjoy its color. You can enjoy its scent, its aroma. You can enjoy what God has given you in that moment. And if you don't have that, you can enjoy whatever else it is. When you sit there and look at your spouse, you can enjoy the person for who they are. Yes, a fallen sinner just like you, and yet somebody who's walking this path with you at this moment. There becomes beauty and joy in these moments because you can see them for what they are without worshiping them. I do not know who originally said this quote. I heard it. It was either an audiobook or a radio podcast type program, and I can't remember, but I wrote it down. I wanted to bring it here today. In the world of creatures, so our earthly world, we may only enjoy what we do not worship. That is a really powerful statement. We can only enjoy what we don't worship. Why is that? Because as I love to say, and as many of you have probably or know exactly what I'm about to say, idols always demand sacrifice. So if you make things in this creative world your idol, you will always be giving things up for them. It's very difficult to enjoy them when you're trying to hold on to them. And it seems like the tighter we try to hold on to them, the worse things get. Maybe not in the immediate term, but it eventually does. We destroy relationships, we destroy family, we destroy our own sense of peace, all of these things, our wealth, especially when we covet, by the way. Some advice on this comes from James chapter 4. People hate when I bring this one up, but it is so true all the time. And usually I find that people who have the worst reaction against this is because they don't want to admit their own sin. Why do we have divisions and strife amongst us? James says, is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? And then he goes on to say that you covet, you want, but you do not have because you ask wrongly. All of these things. That's the nature of things. When we look at the creation and we worship it, we can't find enjoyment in it. It's just not there. But when we don't, when we know where our gifts come from, we can sit back and relax and enjoy the portion God has given us right now. Yes, in the vain life, with all the vain things and the stuff that's around me, the stuff that's around you, all of it perishes and you can't take it with you. You can try to build up the amount of land. You can get all the nice toys and the cars and the trucks, or out here, maybe the tractors, or you fill in the blank, whatever it is. But if it's not portioned out by God, you're chasing the vain things of this life and you're not going to find enjoyment in them. But if we enjoy what God has given and we realize that it is God's portion for us, this changes your outlook literally on everything. This also, and I know this is not a popular teaching, but it's in the Bible, so take it up with God. This really, I think, is one reason we need to take a lot more seriously the multiple places in the Bible that talk about not having debt. Because I think, not always, but many times, when Paul tells us, owe no debt to anyone except love. And then I dislike that certain translations try to change that. NIV in particular is notorious for this. I think it's the NIV, actually. The NIV says, let no debt remain outstanding except love. It changes the whole meaning of it. Why is this? Because we're coveting things that God has not given us in the moment. And as our society becomes more and more debt-ridden and also almost only possible to live in because of debt, i.e. your house, your cars, all these type of things, the less and less joy we have. We're being robbed of it by doing these things. You can be completely robbed of joy by trying to keep up with the Joneses. Working trying to work every ounce of every day, both husband, wife, doing everything they can. And then, they can't enjoy any of it because they get home, look at each other, go to bed. This is not a good pattern of things. Is there a better way? Yes. but it first needs to take a step back and realize that you are portioned with the things that God has given you. And then you can even take joy in the one who has portioned it out. Be thankful, again, is where we're going with that one. So hopefully this gives you some things to think about. Now, again, a lot of people ask me around when I do these studies, again, for marriage advice and the like. So let's pull back out of this just a second. Where do we see a breakdown and having joy in our spouse happen? I will always go back to the one thing that just has proven true time and time again. It goes back to the Ephesians chapter 5, chapter 4 and 5, where we hear, especially in 4, about husbands loving their wives as Christ loves the church, and wives respecting their husbands. When there's a breakdown in love or respect, or when we use our respect or love to get something out of the other person, that's usually when we find a breakdown. But again, that's probably because we are in some way, shape, or form worshiping the creation. We want stuff. So be really careful with that. If we're showing lack of respect toward our spouse, from a husband standpoint, if you're showing from a wife standpoint, if you're showing lack of respect to your husband to try to get something out of them, you will get something, but it's not going to be good. That's not going to be a driving force in man. It will either break them or it will cause them to resent and not love you. And the same thing, guys, if you think that withholding love from your spouse, your wife, is going to be a good thing for you, make her do something and make her come crawling back or something like that, you got another thing coming. You will either mentally damage that person, or you will end up with not what you want coming back. Okay. So just a reminder on that, because again, that seems to be one that we forget a lot. Notice that Solomon repeats himself a lot just here in Ecclesiastes. There is a reason. I know some people say, yes, Pastor, we've heard that before. And I try not to hit on the same topic all the time, but there is a reason I repeat certain things a lot, because we like to forget things. It skips our memory. It's not in the forefront of our mind. If the Bible has to repeat itself over and over again, we probably have to as well when we hear it, right? So just some things to think about. All right. That's what I got for you today. So this morning, I'm going to be getting ready for all the services we got this week. We got Wednesday, we got Sunday, then we have Bible study. So this Tuesday is our last Lutheranism 101 class. We have our new member Sunday coming up this Sunday at Concordia. So we'll be talking about that on Tuesday night. Wednesday morning Bible study, we are still working through the book of John. We're actually almost to chapter 9. So that will fit in from the sermon that we just heard. And then, of course, we always have morning devotions for our congregation here. I put these on for our church, but I know so many other people get a lot out of them. So I'm glad you're with me yet this morning. We have other events coming up, so do check your bulletin, your calendars. There's just too much going on for me to remember all off the top of my head right now. So do check your church calendars and all those things. Lots coming up. I do, before we sign out tonight, this morning, I do want to give a big shout out again for everybody who came out for our first chili and cinnamon roll cook-off. It went amazingly, I thought, especially for having to change the date. Kind of a later notice, because we're trying to get the day worked out with what will work for the kids and what won't, and so forth. We had 10 chilies and I think 7 cinnamon rolls entered, which was really good, I thought, for our first one. I know our judges were full after tasting all of those. So that was a good. Big thanks to our judges. If they're out there watching right now, you guys rocked. Thank you so much for being there for us. And also big thanks to all you for coming out and supporting the youth. We raised $675 for the kids to look forward to. 2024 is our goal, to go to Higher Things Youth Gathering. Hopefully, I don't know exactly where it'll be, but it's usually in one of 2 locations. Hopefully that one will be in Valparaiso, Indiana. So just some things to remind everybody of. Again, thank you everybody for all that you have done. Also, a really huge, big thanks to my wife, who did all the decorations and everything for that event. She did an amazing job. So thank you all again. Okay, so that's what I got. If you got prayer requests, go ahead and put those down below. I need to actually just completely update my prayer list. I need to get a new one out here. It's a little rough, so I apologize if I miss anybody. All right, not seeing any. Let's close with a word of prayer. Almighty and everlasting God, we give thanks to you for all the benefits that you have so daily and richly provided us and the portions that you have given us. Help us find our joy and our thankfulness in you and not in the creation, not in the things of this world, that our hearts would be set to obey your commandments, and that we would continue to meditate on your statutes day and night. Father, we ask that you would be with those in need of our ongoing prayers. Be with Linda, Joyce, Charlene, Bob, Carolyn, Sherry, Paula, Delphia, Linda, Marcia M., Marcia, Gary, Jody, Betty, and all those in need of our prayers that we name in our hearts. Father, we also ask that you would continue to be with our nation and its leaders. During times of uncertainty, give them true and godly wisdom, that we would be a people at peace. Be with those whose work is difficult or dangerous and those who work to preserve peace amongst us, especially Kurt, Corey, Roger, Christopher, Olivia, and Dalton. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen. All right, everyone, God's blessings on your day. Hope to see you tomorrow morning at 9.